Hi, in this video, we're going to be looking at building a risk matrix. Now, I've built a risk matrix before, and it used a custom visual called the Synoptic Designer. However, it is a little bit fiddly to set up, and of course, it is also a custom visual, which is not always possible for every organization. So in this video, we're going to use the new button slicer to achieve the same result. Now, it's going to let you have a risk matrix and interact with each of the different sections in that matrix, clicking on these and seeing the corresponding risks that are related to each different section. So I'll be talking you through the step-by-step process of setting this up. Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So let's get started with building this risk matrix. So we've got this data here, and it's a list of work orders. Now this could be a list of any risks. Okay, it just happens to be work orders here. And we've got these two columns here, and this one in particular, we've got this post-mitigation likelihood severity number. Now, just to let you see what this number represents, it's basically the coordinates of a 5 by 5 risk matrix. Okay, so this is a risk matrix here that we've got, and we can see down the left hand side we've got consequence severity, and across the top here we've got likelihood, and each one gets larger as we go from left to right and as we go from bottom to top. And we can see that the coordinates here for this one would be 5 and 5, and this one here would be 5 and 2. Okay, so that's what that post-mitigation likelihood number refers to. So the first thing I've done is I've actually taken the risk matrix here and I've just copied it. I've removed each of one of the numbers because we don't actually need to see those because we're going to be mapping each one of these different sections to one of these values here in the actual underlying data. And I've just added a white overlay. I've changed the transparency there to be 35%, and I just think it dulls it a little bit because that's a bit too bright to stick on a dashboard, in my opinion. So that just gives it a little bit more of a muted look and feel, and these are the colors here, which we're going to use later on for some conditional formatting. Okay, so having done that, all you do is basically select this, and it's this actually, just in case you're interested, is a table that I've actually created and formatted within PowerPoint. And I'll leave a copy of this PowerPoint presentation so you can just copy and paste it straight in. Or you can modify it with your own likelihood and severity and other information that you've got. Okay, so once you've got the risk matrix created, or the image of the risk matrix created, you just select it, and then we're just going to go and we're going to save this as a picture. Okay, and that's going to be the image that we're going to import into our Power BI dashboard. Okay, so one thing that's worth mentioning is that this risk matrix needs to be a square. Okay, so each one of these needs to be a square, and you can go into the layout here and just make sure that the height and width for each one of these is exactly the same. And that's really important when it comes to creating an overlay, the button slicer visual. Okay, so back in the Power BI dashboard, and I'm going to go and add in the button slicer. So it's this one here, slicer new, and then I'm going to add in the post mitigation likelihood as the actual category there. Okay, so here we can see these numbers started to be displayed. So each one of these is going to correspond to a post mitigation likelihood. Now if I go into this data here, I'm just going to change it slightly so that this post mitigation is at the front. Okay, so we can see that there. So here's 1, 3, and we can see it's filtered this for 1, 3. So it's basically taking each one of these different values here and it's adding it to this slicer here as a separate button. Now that's fine, but what we'll have to do first of all is make sure that this scroll bar doesn't exist, okay? Because at the moment we've got a scroll bar here. We don't want that. So let's go in and start configuring this visual. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to layout, and we're going to keep it as grid, but we're going to make it 5 by 5. Okay, now we can see we've got a grid of 5 and we've got a grid of 5, but we've got a couple of things that are missing here. Now the reason they're missing is because there are no corresponding values to two of the different possible combinations of likelihood and severity. So that needs to be addressed first of all. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new table, and that table is going to be a list of all the different possible combinations of likelihood and severity. Okay, so I'm just going to create that in Excel. Okay, so for building this table, I'm going to actually build it directly in the Power BI report. Now this is static data, so we're fairly kind of comfortable building it in there. If it's something that could actually change, then you might want to build it as a SharePoint list or stick it in a database somewhere. But for this here, and just for ease of this example, I'm just going to paste it straight into here. Okay, so here's a list of each and every single one of the different combinations right through the 25 different permutations, the coordinates. And let's call this risk matrix sort, and we'll just wait for that to load in. Okay, so that's loaded there, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go to model view, and I'm going to go and pull this in to this model view here, and we're going to pull in the work orders, and we're going to go and create a relationship between the post mitigation likelihood severity in the actual list of work orders and the post mitigation severity likelihood in this one here. In fact, I've got that wrong the wrong way around, but it doesn't make much difference. Okay, so we've now got that one-to-many relationship here between this table here and the list of the different work orders in the main work order table. So let's go back to our visual, and we're going to go and pull in the severity likelihood number, not from the list of work orders, but from this table here. Okay, and we'll stick that in here. Okay, so now what we've got is a list of every single one of these. Now, I'm also going to go in here and I'm going to say show items with no data. And that's just going to be making sure that we definitely see each and every single one of these different potential boxes that make up the risk matrix. Okay, so that's step number one. So the next thing we've got to consider is how these are organized here. Now, at the moment, if we go in here, it's going to sort this by descending or ascending. Okay, that's the two options you've got. So we've got ascending, which starts at 1 at the very top left-hand side, 1, 1, and then works along and down, and we can see that we've got 5, 5 at the bottom. Now, if we go back to our risk matrix, we can see that in our example here, we've got 5, 5 at the top right-hand side, and we've got 1, 1 at the bottom left-hand side. So let's go back and we'll try sorting this the other way, which is descending. And we can see that's not any use either, because at the top here we've got 5, 5, and at the bottom we've got 1, 1. Now, what we need to do is try and figure out how we can sort this. Okay, so we'll make this slightly smaller. So we're going to go and import an image here, and it's going to be not the image we're going to use, but it's going to be an image that shows the risk and the likelihood severity numbers. Okay, just so I can explain what's going to happen here. Okay, so we can see here that we've got 5, 5 at the top left-hand side, and our risk matrix wants this to be at the top left-hand side. Now, it's unlikely we're going to go and change all of the risk matrix configuration in your organization to match what's possible in Power BI using the ascending and descending sort. That's not realistic. If you do have a risk matrix which has the risk at the top left-hand side, or I've seen risk matrices that have got also the risk at the bottom right-hand side, so the lowest risks at the top and the highest risks at the bottom, then fine, everything's okay and you don't need to do this next stage. However, ours is not that, and also I wanted to include this anyway in case you've got this situation here. So what we need to do is we need to map this 55, which is going to be the value that's going to be taken from the table, to this 15 here, or actually if we sort it the other way, let's sort it descending. So at least the 5s are in the top row here, to this 51 here. And we need to map this 45 to this 52, and this 35 to this 53, etc., etc. So we need to add a new column to our table that's got a sort order. Okay, so let's go and do that. Okay, so in here what I've done is I've mapped each one of these severity likelihood numbers that are going to come off of the actual work order and that are going to be how we want it displayed in the risk matrix to the corresponding number that's going to be on the risk matrix when it's actually sorted. Okay, now it'll become a bit clearer once we do this. So for example, this one here, 55, is going to be represented as or sorted as 51. So we can see that this 51 is actually going to be represented as 55. Okay, that's what we wanted. Our 55 is going to be sorted as 51. So let's go, and I've done this for every single one of these here. So they've now got, for each one of the actual likelihood and consequence severity combinations, there's a sort order. Okay, so I'm going to go in, I'm going to copy this, and we'll go back in here now to add to this table here that we've created directly inside Power BI. We just go to the source and we just double click on this little cog here, and we're just going to click on a new column, and I'm just going to highlight the whole column, and I'm going to paste this in here. Okay, so that's the mapping here. And then we're going to call this, in fact, actually, I think the column is already called what I need it to be, the sort number. Okay, and then we're just going to press OK. Now, this can get a little bit confusing, but we only ever need to do this once, okay, because the numbers are very, very similar, obviously. But we only ever need to do this once, and once it's done, it's fine. So let's load that in. Okay, so that's loaded in nicely. Let's go and we will click on, I'll just make this a bit bigger actually. We will click on the severity likelihood number, okay, and then we're going to go into this format option here and then column tools, and then we've got this sort by column, and we want this number here to be sorted by this number here. Okay, and we can see that it's actually changed the sort order here already. So what it's doing now is it's basically sorting it by the sort order that we've created, but displaying it in the order that we actually want. Okay, so we've got 55, we've got 45, we've got 43, 53, etc. So that's exactly the order that we want these buttons to be actually displayed. So hopefully you understood what's going on there, and at the end we've got it all working and we've got it sorted in the order that we wanted. So next we're going to go and start actually configuring this and making it look a little bit better. Okay, so let's start to configure this visual here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the title. So we don't need that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the background to the actual visual. So let's go up to the size and style, and we'll get rid of the background. And we're also going to get rid of the background for each one of these different buttons. So we're going to go and minimize that, and we're going to go down to buttons, and we're going to go and switch off the fill. Okay, so that's starting to look better. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this one here now, and I'm going to pull in the actual matrix that we're going to use, because this was just for demonstration purposes. So let's get rid of this. I'm going to go to Insert, Image, and we'll pull in another image here, which has got the kind of muted overlay. And let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so great. So we need this to be basically an overlay to this here, which is a square. So we need this to be a square as well. So let's start thinking about how we can get this to look as much like a square as possible. Now the first thing is we've got some padding at the top and the bottom and the left and the right of the actual visual itself. So let's address that. So I'm going to go to Style, and we're going to go to Padding, and we can see that that's all set at 5. Now even though it's 5, there still looks like there's more padding at this side than there is at, or less padding at this left and the right hand side than it is at the top. Now we can actually do something about that by making it slightly smaller here. But in here we need to make sure that the height and the width are the same. So let's make these 400. And we're going to lock in this aspect ratio. So that means that if we try and make this bigger or smaller, it's going to stay at a combination of, these numbers are going to stay the same, which is good. So let's make it back to 400. It doesn't really matter what size it is, it'll just... Okay, so it looks like if you actually, even if you lock the aspect ratio, you can overwrite it here. It's only when you actually drag and drop it. So let's change these back to 400. Right, so we can put that, or start laying that on top of this matrix here. It's not looking too bad, but it doesn't actually overlay it. These ones are fine, but as it goes to the bottom, it kind of gets a little bit less of an overlay, so we can just tinker about with that for a little bit. Okay, now another thing we can do is we can go into layout, and we can change this here, this spacing between the buttons. Now you can actually customize it. We've got spacing between rows and spacing between columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, in fact we can leave that the same because it's going to be the same anyway. We want that to be 5. Okay, now that's going to help us a little bit because that's then going to mean that the padding around the outside and between the columns is exactly the same. Okay, so it's getting slightly better there. It's probably good enough. Now we're going to go and remove these borders here because we don't actually need them. So let's go and we'll do that. So we're going to go down to the button, the bottom here, buttons at the bottom here, and we're going to get rid of these borders. Okay, so Now we've got that done, the next thing we need to do is make sure that this image is at the back and that the button visual is at the front. So to do that, we're going to go into add the select option here, selection. So we'll make sure that's available there. We'll just minimize that. And if we go and open up the selection panel here, we can see that at the moment the image is above the actual severity likelihood. So all we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that image is below by just dragging and dropping it, and we'll just change that as well to be risk matrix image. Right, and we will then go back into the size and style here, and just let's make sure that we've got this image here selected, or this visual here selected. And what I'm also going to do is go into the advanced options, in fact it's under here, properties, advanced options, and just make sure that this maintain order layer is selected. And that means when we publish it, if you click on the image at the back, it won't pull it forward and it won't overlay it on top of this this image here, this button visual here. So that is us getting towards getting an image that looks as if it's fairly well matched between the visual and the underlying risk matrix. Now, obviously, what is displaying here is not what we want. We want a count of the number of work orders that are related to this here. So we can click on each one of these at the moment, and we can see it's basically filtering on 54, and it's given us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at 54. Now, we want to see the number 5 here. We don't want to see the number 54 there. So let's go and we'll create a measure that we can use, and I'll show you how you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new measure, and it's going to be a really, really straightforward measure. Work order count equals count rows, and it's just going to be the table of work orders. Okay, so there's nothing really complicated about this measure at all. So we'll put that in. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to think about how we're going to display that count of work orders in here. So we're going to go back into the properties here and just make sure we've got the visual selected. And if we go to this call out values, and under here we've got two sections. We've got or three sections really. We've got what the value in the label refers to. So is it the default, the hover, the press, or the selected? So we'll leave it at default for just now. We've got the value itself, which we can see we can switch that on and off if we go in here. Okay, so we'll leave it on for just now. And then we've got this label. So if we switch on the label, at the moment it's not going to give us anything. But we can see we've got an option here to add a field in which will represent that label. So we can add a measure in here. And that's what we're going to add in here. We're going to add in this work order count here. And we can see that this is now showing the work order count related to any of these records that have got this 4 and 5 or 55 or 54. So some of these have got 0 against them, and we can see we've got quite a few in here. Now one thing I'm going to do is actually, this data set is across multiple different weeks, so I'm just going to put a filter on here to make sure that we've only got the most recent week. So I'm just going to make sure that we're only going to filter for the week of 2022, week number 31. Okay, so that means that the filter is going to be fine. Now we can see the numbers here are a little bit more reasonable as to what is actually open at the moment. So we'll go and make this a little bit bigger here because we're going to use this quite a bit just to confirm that we've got the right information here. And we can see we've got that 55 selected, and we can see that it changed its color. Okay, when it was selected, it changed its color. Now this is going to be the benefit of using this particular visual, is that the values and the labels can change color depending on the status. So you've got a default color, you've got a hover color, you've got a press color, and you've got the actual selected color. Now what I want though is I don't actually want to see the 15 or the 25 because we can see that section there. We just want these numbers here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these values off. Okay. Now if you turn the values off, what happens is these go under justified to the left hand side. Now I can turn the values back on again, and I can center that, okay, because we want these to be in the center, just like these are. But as soon as I turn these values off, the labels just automatically default to the left hand side. And if we go into the labels here, there's no left or right justification option for these. You can put below or above the actual callout value, which is here, but you can't actually justify it. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch these back on again, and that's going to center that. And we're going to go and format this so that it's hidden. Okay, now to do that, we're going to add a new measure, and we're going to call it transparent color equals, and we're going to go in brackets hashtag, and we're going to say 00, 00, 00, 00, 0, and we're going to add an extra couple of zeros at the end there. Okay, and this is going to give us a hexadecimal code for a transparent color. Now you could use any of the first 6 zeros, could be anything you want. It's this 00, 0 at the end that makes it transparent. So once we've got that, we're going to go at this default value again for the value, and we can see we've got some conditional formatting options here. So I'm going to go and open this up, and in here we're going to use a field value, and we're going to go and find that transparent color, and we're going to add that straight in here. Okay, so we can see that we've been able to preserve the fact that these are centered. Now we're going to have to deal with the padding in a little bit, because we don't want it to be lower down in the vis matrix. We want it to be close to the center of the vis matrix. But now we've got the issue where it was left justified. We've got that resolved. So the next thing we can do is we can go into the button and we can play a bit with the padding. So let's go into the button here. And if we go into this padding option here, and we can go to custom, and we can make this padding at the bottom a bit higher up. Okay, so it's looking a little bit better. These are more or less in the center there. I don't think it's ever going to be 100% correct, but it's going to be much better than it was before. Okay, so now we've done that, let's go on to the next thing, which is to make these slightly bigger first of all. So now what we're dealing with each time is not the actual callout value here. So we can actually minimize that. It's still switched on, but it's completely transparent. It's this label value that we're dealing with here. So let's make that, say, yeah, just a little bit bigger, maybe 12. That's fine. Okay, and now we're going to look at how we can change these. So if you click on one of these, we can see that's came back again. Okay, so what I need to do is go back into values, and if we go to hover, we can see that it's got that white value there. So I just need to change each one of these to be the transparent color, the transparent measure. So let's go to the field value, we'll change that to the transparent color. I'm just going to do that for each one of these. Press, and then finally the selected. Okay, so now if I select this, we can see that it's selected it there, but it hasn't actually displayed the 53 there. Okay, now I want to get some feedback here if I've actually selected some of these. So let's go and we can deal with that. So we're going to go into the buttons themselves, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually turn on the fill, just so you can see what it is. So the fill is there already, and we can see we've got this hovered over here, and if we select one of them, we can see it's got a color. Now I want to be able to select multiples of these, and at the moment it's just a single select. So let's deal with that first of all. So we'll go to slicer settings, and we can see that the default is for single select to be on. So let's switch that off, and now it means that we can select multiple options at a time, which is great, and then we can deselect them as well. So that's all we need to do there. Now the background color here is never going to be 100% correct, okay, because of just the way we've got it here. Now it may be possible to do it at some stage, but we don't actually need it to be that. So let's go and turn the button fill off for just now. Okay, but what we are going to change to give us a little bit of feedback is the actual the text here. So let's go back into our callout values, and we're going to change the label based on whether it is a hover, a press, or a select. So if we go to hover, what I want this label to be, in fact, actually just go to default first because I want it to be a darker color. So we'll make it this color here as the default, which is fine, just a little bit darker there. And we're going to go to hover first. And if we hover over this, it's exactly the same at the moment, but I want this to be slightly bigger. Okay, so we can hover it and we can see it gets slightly bigger as we hover over these. Okay, that one doesn't seem to be working for some reason, but these are. And then if we go in and also make it bold. Okay, so I want that to be bold. And then we can see these are all bold. This one here, I don't know why it's not working. I'll need to have a look at that in a second. But you can see as we hover over them, they get bold. Okay, so that's giving us some instant feedback that we're actually located above this particular sector here. Now the other thing I need to do is on press, we'll leave it as, we'll do the same on press, make it bold, and then on select, we're going to leave it as that larger 14 and bold. So when we click on each one of these, it's working now, we can see that it's a lot easier to see that these have been selected now that they're actually bold. Okay, and here they are there. Now, to deselect them, you've got to actually click on them again. So we want to actually create, this is a slicer, which is great actually, because it means that we can use the clear slicer selection button. So let's add that in. So I'm going to go to Insert, Buttons, and we've got this clear all slicers. And we can see we've got a button here, and I'm going to go to the button style, and the text is going to be white. Okay, we can say clear all slicers, and I'm going to go to the border. Is it on here? There we go, border, and we'll make that white. Okay, and we can play about with this as much as we want, but and we've got options for the default for when it's selected and hovered, etc., etc. So I'm not going to go that into that in too much detail, but what we are going to do is, if we select multiple ones of these, we can basically click on that, and it's going to go and clear the slicers. Okay, so we'll move that across the top there. Now another little neat thing here, I said I wasn't going to configure this too much, but it's going to go to the button style, and there is an option to add an icon. There we go, icon. So we'll add this icon in here, and in the icon I want this to be clear all slicers. Here we go, it's a little icon there, and we can also change, I think, the icon size. There we go, we can make it say 10. Okay, and then we know that 10 is quite small, we can make it 40, or let's stick with 20, and then we can change the weight, and then we'll change the padding, and then we'll change the colour. Okay, so it's just got a little bit of a clear slicers button there, and we can play about that as much as you want. Right, okay, so we're kind of getting there now. Okay, so the next bit of functionality here is going to be to add a 0 here if the value is actually 0, rather than blank. Now, it might well be that you want a positive confirmation that there is actually 0 there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new measure, and this is the measure here. So the work order count, text, and then we're going to use this format statement here, and we're going to wrap it around the actual work order count, and we're going to plus a 0 onto that to force it to be 0. And then we're going to also format that using this string here, which is going to force it to be a 0 if there's no value. So if this returns a blank, or if the value is 0, sorry, it's going to be a 0. But if the value is not 0 and it's in the thousands, it's going to actually cause there to be a comma between these. So the reason we need to create this text format here to be able to put in here is that if I go back here, let's just minimize this filter here, tidy it up a little bit to give ourselves some space. Okay, so if I go back into this visual here, now remember in the callout values we're using a label. Okay, now if I go back to default, because you have to be default to enable this label here, this, even though we've put a measure in here, it's actually converted it to text. Okay, that is actually text. So if we want to format this measure, so if I go in and let's take off the filter here, because I just want to demonstrate the thousands. I'll minimize that again. Okay, so some of these are now in the thousands. If I go into this work order count here, and I'm going to go and add this thousands indicator here, we can see that it's not formatting these thousands with the commas, even though the underlying field, underlying measure has been configured to be thousands, and that's because it's converting it to text, and it doesn't have that thousands concept because it's a text field. So what we need to do is go and create our own measure. There's a text measure that's got that format function statement there. And we also need this 0 there to force it to be 0. So once we've done that, we can then go in and replace this label here with the new one that we've created. Okay, and we can see that we've got the zeros here just to confirm that it is actually 0, and we've got these thousands here if there were thousands. Now, it's unlikely actually there's going to be thousands in a risk matrix like this, but just for belts and braces, if it is, then that's going to be the case. So we can go back on here now and just put back in the week number to be what it was before. Now I selected 31 because I know that one's got a few in each of these top sections here. Okay, so that is it. Okay, so next I want to be able to just quickly show you how you can add some conditional formatting to here based on the actual value that's selected here. Okay, so where it sits, where the actual work order sits on the risk matrix. So what I've done is I've gone into this this helper table I've got here. So let's just view that. Risk matrix sort. And I've gone through it, and for each one of these different severity likelihood numbers, I've assigned it a code here. Okay, so a formatting color here. Okay, so we can see these ones here all correspond to the sections in these areas here. Okay, so once I've done that, the next thing I've done is I've gone and created a conditional formatting measure. Now this is a fairly straightforward measure here. What we do is we use we get the selected value for the work order post mitigation likelihood severity number. So that's this number here. And this will only return a value, only return true, no, return the value here if there is only one value here. Okay, so that's what we need for this measure, so that it'll only work if it's unaggregated. Okay, so on a row by row basis here. And then it's going to look up this table that we've created, and it's going to look for this value here. Okay, so if we just go and just remind ourselves what this lookup does. Okay, so it first of all, I mean, the first, it's a little bit confusing here, but the results column is the column we want to actually return. Okay, so we want to return this formatting color here. And the search column and the search value are the two columns that we're going to search through. So we're going to search through this risk matrix severity likelihood number column. And we're going to search through that until we can find this search value here, which is going to be this selected value. Now, this selected value, of course, is going to be the value that's returned for each one of these different rows. Okay, so it's just going to go and look through this lookup value, look through the severity likelihood column, find the severity that's corresponding to the current row, and then return the color. And then that color is going to be the result, and that's going to be what's returned by this measure. Okay, so hopefully you get that. Right, and then once we've done that, we're going to go in here and we're just going to go into this option here. We're going to right click on the field we want. We're going to change the background color. We're going to use the field value, and then we're going to go and select the value we want here, which is this post mitigation conditional formatting. Okay, and we can see it's nicely formatted here based on that color mapping. Now, the one thing I will say is that it's quite a big, because the title here is quite big, so we can reduce the size of the title. But another thing we can do that I'll just very quickly show you is just add in an indicator here, rather that's going to be quite nice and neat, and just a little indicator rather than use this this highlight the background of this column here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look up the value. I'm just going to show you this. So I've gone and found this Unicode character, which is just for a circle. Okay, so I'm going to go and copy that, and I'm going to go into the work order here. I'm going to add a new column. I'm just going to call this indicator, and it's going to be equal to this circle here that I've just pasted in here. Now the indicator, because it's just text here, it's going to be exactly the same for every single row in the table of work orders, or whatever the risks are that you're tracking here. And I'm going to go and add that in just at the very start of this, and then I'm going to apply the conditional formatting to the font color of this indicator. Now we could have done it to the font color of the actual of the likelihood and severity as well, but I think it just looks nicer if it's a circle every single time. Okay, so let's go and apply that post mitigation conditional formatting there. Okay, and we can see that that's been formatted as well, and I'm going to go and just take it off of this one here. So right click on here, remove conditional formatting, all, and then the final thing we're going to do is just go into this indicator here and just make it a dash. Okay, so just a little bit subtler and less overpowering. It would maybe make it a little bit darker, so maybe a little bit light. But that is an option there if you want to go and add some conditional formatting, so you can actually click on here, or as you're scrolling through these, you can see quite clearly which ones fall into which of the different categories here of risk. Okay, so hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully it's something you can apply in your own business. And if you did find it useful, it's always much appreciated and helps the channel a lot if you can give it a thumbs up. And if you've got any comments, of course, leave them below. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, then hit the subscribe button. So apart from that, that's me for this video, and I'll talk to you in the next video.